Hey, thanks so much, Vinnie, for hosting us today. We really appreciate it and are honored to be part of your great program. Maybe I'll just start by introducing who LeapGreat is. We're a group of very passionate SAP veterans who've spent over 30 years within and around SAP. We've seen firsthand the tremendous power that these ERP systems can bring to companies. But we've also seen firsthand how challenging and difficult it can sometimes be to get these transformations right while still keeping the project on time, on budget, and on scope. I personally started doing implementations back in 1990 at the first North American customers of SAP's early R2 systems. These were companies like Kodak or DuPont, Anheuser-Busch, Bristol-Myers, companies like that. And several others who then started the US wave of SAP implementations that then swept the US and the world market for SAP ERP. And after those implementations, where I was working for Price Waterhouse at the time, I eventually joined SAP and spent 28 years inside SAP in a variety of consulting, management, and executive roles, always pursuing a passion for customer value and ease of consumption. I was in charge of the transition of customers from R2 to R3 and then later from R3 to ECC. My only claim to fame, Vinny, is that I came up with the name ECC, which to be honest, I'm not proud of. It's a funny story that I can tell you at another time if you're interested about how that name came to be. But I'm not actually, sorry, go ahead, Vinny.
Bob, like you, I was part of the group at Gartner that coined the term ERP, and I'm not very proud of the term. So.
I wish we could rewind sometimes, right? Control Z. But so I'm not actually the most experienced in our team. My colleague and head of engineering at LeapGreat, Dean Mill, began his career actually rolling out R1 at SAP's very first customer, ICI, and their international subsidiaries way back in the days of R1 together with SAP's founders, and has been implementing ever since. He's also the original author of the SAP Best Practice Manufacturing Baseline that was actually modeled on his customer experience. So what drove us to launch LeapGreat was the conviction over many years, Vinny, that customers can get much more value out of SAP ERP systems. And we believe with dramatically lower effort and risk if it's done in a slightly different way. So there are now today, luckily, there are new technologies and tools emerging that enable us to approach ERP transformations in completely new ways. And all the movement in AI is completely, it's really exciting to see what's happening. We'll talk about that in a second. And in fact, what I'm about to show you is not just about helping customers, but it's also about helping the ecosystem of system implementers. That's our goal too. To help them eliminate risk and elevate value for their clients. All of us in this industry are faced with a tsunami of tens of thousands of S/4HANA transformations in the next few years, where everyone is struggling to scale and find resources and wondering how we will ever manage all that. And we feel that this approach can also help the industry to scale and help more companies get to success with SAP S/4HANA in the next few years. So without much further ado, I'll jump right in. Sorry, Vinny, go ahead.
The key word there is automation, right? One of my customers, I've been running the video series for 4 years now. And, I'm always pushing people about generative AI and what are you doing about verticals? What are you doing about emerging economies and so on? And he slapped me in the face and he said, Vinny, you're always pushing vendors to look ahead. How about their existing customer bases? Half the ECC customers have not moved. Probably 80% of Oracle customers have not moved. And so why don't you tell vendors to focus more in this area? And that's where it can be done manually. It'll have to be done through automation. So really looking forward to hearing your automation perspective.
Well, actually, Vinny, what you said is correct. We almost have no choice. If we look at the numbers and we look at the time frames, something has to change. And we believe that AI and automation are the key to actually helping us to achieve this. So yeah, let's just take a look right in. So maybe our mission at LeapGreat is actually a very, very simple to explain, and it's reflected in our company logo as well. We're trying to flip the value to risk curve in SAP ERP transformation. So we see that many companies compromise on value in an effort to keep the project on time, on budget, with manageable disruption, with limited available resources and expertise. And they try to avoid risk in a number of areas. They try to avoid, running over time, over cost, disruption, and they worry a lot, especially nowadays, if they will have the right expertise, because there's a huge shortage of expertise in the industry. And we are convinced that for much lower risk and effort, we can significantly elevate the value of ERP. So what do we mean by value? We believe it's not just about the functionality. The functionality is already extremely rich from half a century of SAP developments. There's tons and tons of functionality in SAP, and there's always more that comes along. We believe that it's more about moving from a current ERP system, wherever the customer is, to firstly a clean core that's based on best practices, and then leveraging AI-powered automation and achieving really intelligent ERP, and then what SAP often calls the intelligent enterprise, in which the system not only manages business processes, but can also predict and decide autonomously on best actions to take and interact with humans, much like an expert would. In a sense, it'll become, I believe ERP will become something like a large language model for business operations, and will be able to think and advise on alternatives. We see countless opportunities in that direction, and as we can hear from SAP and the announcements it's making these days, they're heavily shifting their focus to AI, and we'll see many more exciting possibilities emerge in this area. So the question is, how do we do this? So let's start with the risk side, and how do we reduce all this using automation? So the question comes up, Vinnie, is what is the root cause of the risk and challenges in these projects? Interestingly, it most often, in our experience, has nothing to do with the quality of the software or the implementer or the project team or the methodology. Nowadays, the quality of all those are usually very high. Of course, there are always, exceptions to what I've said. There sometimes are problems in the technology, and there sometimes are problems with the implementer. But I would say that's not really the root cause of the problem here. I think we have over our years become convinced that the reason is something more basic, and I think can be summarized in the word late. Most of the detailed visibility and heavy lifting and the escalations and problems happen very late in the implementation. So let me just give you an example. So let's imagine you're on a transformation toward S/4HANA, and you're going through the usual phases of your methodology. In this example, you might be using SAP, or we use SAP Activate as the methodology, but there are many methodologies around which are fairly similar, kind of variations on a theme. And what we found that is in the first phases of the project, the work is very conceptual, where the customer needs to imagine an end state. You don't know what you don't know when you start. You might see some demos, you'll see some proofs of concepts, you'll see examples, you'll see lots of explanations and presentations. And it's always about imagining your own real target system, which will actually only begin to appear later during a realization phase, and often a bit late in the realization phase as well. And after this, the project takes on a new dynamic, which is very noticeable. It's almost like shifting gears very heavily in the project. I think we've all seen that, where you begin to work in the reality of the real working target system. And only then do we get detailed visibility into our new system reality. And the surprises start to appear, where you start hearing comments like, oh, that is not how I thought it worked, or why can't the system do this or that, or didn't we specify what we wanted this or that to do? There's no such thing as a perfect specification or a perfect blueprint. It's the devils are often in the details, and we see them quite late. So this is where we start to see many detailed gaps emerge. We see late change requests emerge, and the scope begins to creep. We have replanning efforts, we need new budgets, the time begins to be reduced, we start to get into a time crunch for things like testing and change management, and then we start making compromises. We start saying, oh, we look at the watch and we say, hey, we should do a workaround here because this time is running away, or we need a compromise here and there. And there are many other surprises that come along, and if you put all this together, this leads us to, sadly, I must say sadly, because I love this industry, I love this, but even today, when you just go on the internet for 10 minutes and you look around at risk in ERP projects, you'll see statistics which even today, after half a century of as ERP transformations are still quite sad and sobering, right? Where you can still see that, in fact, half of ERP projects today still fail the first time and have to be relaunched. And it makes a lot of customers very cautious about how to approach ERP projects or to simply postpone them. So yeah,
Bob, I was with a higher ed client a few years ago, and the chancellor came to the meeting, kickoff meeting, and I was like, wow, this is great for an ERP project, chancellor. And he pulled me aside and he said, Vinnie, I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous because all I read is ERP is like a death sentence. And I felt so bad for the industry. I felt so bad for the industry that ERP has become such a, almost guaranteed overrun, behind budget, and so on. And like you say, we've done 100,000 of these. Shame on us for not becoming better.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Vinny, I've heard that same comment from so many, and it pains us as well in the industry because we believe that it doesn't need to be like that. But to be honest, I've been on many projects where we ran into this exactly, and it was not, you couldn't really point fingers to where the fault was. It's just that you just don't know what you don't know in the first half of the project. And then once reality sets in, you start to think in a different world. And so we thought, is there a way we can maybe crack this problem? And so our solution is the following. What we thought is, well, and this is something we've been working with even at SAP for many years, is trying to think, how would it be possible to move the reality to the beginning of the project? This might sound strange, but in the age of AI, there's a lot of things that sound strange but are becoming possible. And so we said, what would be if we could move the reality to the beginning of the project and avoid much of the conceptual imagination of a future state, and really have your future state in your hand, And so we just call this front loading. So what we would do is we would front load the real implemented target system right in the beginning instead of backloading the project. Then as you walk through the steps in your methodology, the customer can always compare the learnings to the real system and evolve the system right away from the beginning rather than flying blind, conceptualizing a future world. But how is this possible when we haven't even gotten to the realization phase and the system's not yet implemented, right? So as strange as it sounds, what we do is we implement the system first. So let me explain that a little bit, what that means. So we begin by gathering as much of the data and requirements as we can and loading these into what we call our automation hub. And this is where part of the AI-powered automation magic happens. These are bot technologies and AI that analyze the data. And through these technologies, this performs the actual configuration at very high speed and implementation of the system based on the data. And this is done on top of a platform that, when I say platform, I mean it's something like what the car industry does, right? They pull a platform which they develop very highly, and then they just put the differentiation on top of it. This is what we call our LeapGreat standard platform that's based on a SAP clean core with best practices. We have over 100 configured end-to-end processes for the customer that we make sure there's integration right from the outset between finance and logistics, and make sure that the flows are integrated and the books and costing structures are sound. And we even do preliminary period end closings to test the system to make sure it's a viable running system, and not just a demo system, but it's really a viable running system that can run on its own. And what we then do is it also we take BTP and BTS, so BTS, the Business Transformation Suite, and best practice procedures in such a way that when you get your system, the documentation and tools are already tailored for your needs. So another problem in these projects is that innovation such as automation is also done late in the project. This is where we talk about the value piece, right? We've configured it so that we can allow for rapid AI-powered automation even during the project when you're configuring the processes, so that you actually embed the AI. So this is where we can ensure that the customer gets much more value. It's like, Vinny, when you build a house nowadays, buildings have all these smart technologies. In the old days, they used to build conventionally first, and then they'd add the wiring and sensoring later. Today, when you build the building, you actually build the smart technologies into the design of the building, and that's what this is. We try to build it into the design, so right at the outset, these are actually intelligent processes already as they come out, you know, and we use various technologies for that. We can automate a lot of what we need, but of course there's always a residual amount of manual work that we will need to add to refine and adjust. And this is where we have the concept of a factory, where our veterans will refine the system and make sure it's a fully running system. We will even perform an audit. We have a CPA and a CMA on board that actually do the audit, because we put a lot of value on the soundness of the system right at the beginning. And it might sound like this would take many months, but it actually only takes us 7 days, thanks to these technologies, to deliver the customer working system. This system is, as I mentioned, not a demo or a POC or just an accelerator. It's really your working and tested target system with tailored documentation for your data. And it includes also a navigation cockpit to allow easy access into all the detailed processes and navigation throughout the system, even if the customer is seeing an SAP system for the first time. So this allows for a test drive by all the business users and project team. And this test drive then makes sure it closely matches the customer requirements. It might sound like this would be a very expensive exercise, but actually it's free of charge. We don't actually charge for this. We give it to the customer for free. And only if the customer wants to use the system do they then sign up, and we turn over the ownership to the system. They can use it on their licenses, and we offer a fixed price for a service package that can follow. The service package is that, firstly, we go further into end-to-end testing, and we do all of this right before you even start. So in other words, we not only get you the system, we get the people up to speed, and then when we go into the first steps into the methodology, this always allows us to have reality at our side as we go through the checklists in the methodology. And following this, the factory is available for iterative, rapid refinements that come out of learnings in the various stages of the methodology. And these are kept in a backlog, and whenever there's a critical mass, the customer can go for an iteration trip to the factory, and then we bring back whatever is necessary. So we work with the project team, so the implementer, the customer on the project, and it's in standby in the back. So it's kind of more of a manufacturing model, Vinnie, than we're not really a consulting company. We're more of a manufacturer of these systems that you can then, you can do a recall, you know, and bring back and say, we have to take some changes and then bring it back, you know. And even after go live, a lot of the most valuable learnings and requirements actually only emerge after go lives. And then what would be nice here is to have the factory on standby, where you can then do this as well. So we just have a subscription approach where you can have the factory in standby, and then you can get, you know, a critical mass of backlog items, and then you can send it back, and you can do this for forever if you want, you know. And this is where we get that. So this is in a nutshell what LeapGreat does. Yeah, go ahead.
Couple questions. You know, I hear over and over again. I've seen over and over again in the SAP world. There are a couple of big issues, right? There's a lot of customized code.
Yeah.
For whatever reason in ACC, people went crazy. Clean code is really important, as you point out. So one question is, what do you do about all these thousands of customizations? And the other thing is, partly my fault, you know, when the costs around 2006, 7, 8 were starting to really spike, I started telling people, ring fence ECC, you know, you can buy cloud solutions for HR, for CRM, et cetera, et cetera. And again, people went crazy. Some SAP shops have 60, 70, 80 cloud applications around ECC, right? And they go, you know, I want to move to S4, but what do I do about all these surround systems? So tell me how do you tackle both the code customization and the surround applications?
Yeah. Yeah, so Vinny, I am personally also very guilty of having built a lot of what the Germans call golden water taps and balconies and stuff onto ECC, right? I think the part of the problem in those days is it was not so easy to separate extensions to an ECC, right? You didn't have all these low code, no code technologies that exist today. You didn't have all these enhancement, like these non-modifying enhancements and stuff. And one of the jobs I used to have was I also have a patent on one of the technologies that went into the enhancement packages at SAP, where we wanted to keep the core stable, and that's why we separated the enhancement packs at that time. But the technologies have gone on, and BTP offers a ton of new approaches of how you can add that stuff in non-modifying ways so that they're stable, and you can do it in much easier ways now with low code and no code. And by the way, those things also emerged at a time where there was no RPA, so robotic process automation. A lot of the stuff that was done at that time is also, if you look at it closely, is kind of attempts at automation of certain things. So today, with all these technologies, it's much easier to go to I don't like using the word easy, but it's easier to go to a clean core than it used to be in the old days, where you'd want to go to a stable core. The idea of a clean core is nothing new. We used to use similar language in the old days to say, hey, stick to standard and stuff. But the problem was the easiest way to extend was to just simply go into ABAP and go into, write some of your own programs. Today, even the tooling in SAP is made so that you can separate it. So there's also tooling to help you analyze those customizations that you've done and separate them so that you can keep some of them and still achieve a clean core. But you're absolutely right. And then for your second question, the surroundings, Vinnie, I think there's a kind of a stabilization in place now where CRM begins and where ERP and where it ends and where ERP begins. There was a lot of gray area for a long time. Same is true for SRM, and same is true for supply chain pieces. And I think those interfaces are more clearly defined than they used to be, and so you can actually get a lot of those certified interfaces. So I would say, and now with automation being there, I think a lot of this stuff that we tried to do with just basic tools in the old days is now a lot easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is we can leave behind a lot of the customizations and the surround ring fence applications. We can continue to live with them. See, sometimes SAP is not very clear about that. We're like, S4 can do everything. It can do everything, right? So it's important to point out that, hey, look, you will need the surround applications, but the integration is so much easier in an API world. So
yeah, I think there will be some refactoring that is necessary, because let's face it, a lot of those customizations may actually be necessary for the customer. It might not be that they just want to do, they need it. So in some cases, we might have to ring fence those pieces and bring them into a new environment, or we can refactor them using new technologies. And that today is a lot easier than it was, just even 7-8 years ago. It's much easier today, So. Yeah, so I think, Vinny, that's kind of what I wanted to share. Of course, we can drill down into countless areas, but our mission, we believe that through the power of automation, we're able to achieve this vision of flipping that curve, and really helping not only eliminating risk and elevating value, but also helping to scale the industry. We was talking with one SI yesterday, where they're very frustrated because they said they could easily do 10 projects, but they only have capacity for 5. Now, if we could change things around and say maybe through these kind of approaches, they could have the capacity to do 10 instead of 5 with the same resources based on things we can do in automation together and stuff. So we think what we're doing, can help to ease the pain that I think all of us are looking as we look at this tsunami of how we're going to manage these tens of thousands of customers in future.
Bob, that light bulb needs to go on also. Both I was at Pricewaterhouse when you were there at the same time. I still find the SIs are still stuck in the hand-to-hand combat mindset. The person who told you I could do 10, but I only have people for 5. You can have 5 plus 5 robots, so.
Yeah, I mean, to put it simply, Vinny, I think the way you said it is it's probably a bit more complex than that, but it basically is that how can we enhance our human capacity
Exactly.
with AI automated capacity, right? And I think we're just at the beginning of that. It's really exciting to see. I think the most exciting decades are ahead of us in enterprise computing. It's a pity we're at an age where we might not experience all of those decades, but I think the energy is there to go for. I think the next 30 will be even more interesting than the last 30, So hopefully we'll still see a bunch of that, Vinny.
Bob, we are young.
Exactly.
And to your point about, I wrote a book about 6, 7 years ago called Silicon Collar, and I looked at automation, and I found so many examples of people. I call them super workers, right? Doing stuff that was unimaginable without technology. UPS drivers. It's amazing how many of them have driven 1 million miles without an accident. You couldn't do that without telematics and better
Yeah,
navigation systems and so on, right? So every industry has examples. Our
yeah,
industry needs to similarly, increase productivity.
exactly.
This is,
No, exciting
Bob,
times.
thank you very much.
No, thank you, Vinny. I really appreciate being part of your program, and yeah, I left my email there in case any of your viewers want to get more information on this. We'll be happy to keep iterating. We're very excited, and we're learning a lot as we go along as well. And great to learn from you, Vinny, as well, to see your perspective. So thank you so much.
Bob, it's always a pleasure talking to a veteran and somebody has a couple of patents to his name. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Vinny.